Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Whiskey and Weird. I'm super excited to be back, as I expressed last week when I was back after months and months and months. Really excited tonight to have a new friend of mine, Mr. Jason Hewlett. I got the honor of investigating with him just not last month, now April. So a couple months ago, when he and some folks came down, my friend Pete Renn, you might remember him, to investigate at a local bar here in Coeur d'Alene. So super excited to have him on. Now, Jason has, oh gosh, he's got just a list of great things happening for him. He is a contributor to Paranormality Magazine. Can't even say that. Co-founder of the Canadian Paranormal Society. He's author of multiple books, and I'm excited to talk with him a little bit about that. Some he's co-written with Pete, others he's written on his own. You might have seen on my page, I've been sharing a lot about their docuseries, We Want to Believe. It's going to be streaming again on a new format, Paraflix, so you're going to want to grab that. But so many things, it'll all come out. He's just got so much going on. I'm really excited to welcome him, and he likes whiskey. So we're going to sip a little whiskey while Jason is on. So I'm going to bring him on, you guys. Please give him a warm welcome. Say hello, and be sure to ask your questions as we go through this.
Hello.
Hello, Jason.
Welcome.
Thanks for being on tonight. I appreciate
thanks for having me on. It's great to be here. How can you not want to talk weird stuff and drink whiskey at the same time?
I know. You know what? It kind of came out. The whole weird whiskey and weird thing was. I'll have to tell you the story. I won't go into it right now because my audience has heard it like 12 times. But you know, that's what you think of when you would just want to sit around late at night talking about all sorts of stuff with the right kind of people and just sipping whiskey, right? Like, I don't know, I can think of 100 people I'd love to do that with. So I'm sure that you can too. And you probably have sipped whiskey with some pretty cool people and talked about weird stuff. So that's awesome.
Very true.
You said you'd be drinking whiskey. What are you drinking tonight?
I'm drinking Bullet bourbon.
Oh, nice.
Which is a new favorite of mine. I discovered it was funny. Like, there's a Sylvester Stallone movie called Bullet to the Head that came out in like 2012. And in that movie, his character drank Bullet bourbon. But at the time, I guess it was just coming out. No one heard about it. And that was the running joke in the movie. And so I'd always had it in my head. And then one day I actually saw it at our liquor store. And I'm like, well, I got to try that. It's really good stuff.
Nice. Yeah, I have tried a couple of theirs. Which one is your favorite?
It's kind of the main one.
The orange label or the green label?
That one.
Yeah, okay, there you go. That's usually how I remember. I started drinking whiskey a few years ago, probably like four years ago now. And what's funny is I just went straight to Scotch. I mean, I love all the whiskeys, but I have a nephew who's he got really into it. And I messaged him. I'm like, I really want to get into drinking whiskey. And what do you recommend? And basically he told me the last thing I was going to want to drink was single malt Scotch, but that's right where I went. And I think it's a familial thing. So I'm from a big Irish family, but my Irish family always liked to drink Glenlivet and Glenfiddich. And that's right where I went. And I love to sip that. So tonight my sister bought this when I first started the show. It's a High West whiskey. Let's put this in here. See that? Nice. But it's peaty. It's got Scotch. It's just all sorts. It's a blend, but it's got that kind of peaty flavor to it that Scotches have. So I'm just gonna sip on that tonight. Nice. And thank you to my sister Jacqueline who bought this for me. I do like to get on here and try a new whiskey, and I have a handful of people who chime in just for that portion of my show. And go through the whole, what's the nose, and share my thoughts and notes on it. But you know what, that gets a little expensive after a while when you have to spend like $40 to $100 on a bottle of whiskey every week. So I thought, well, it's Jason. He's gonna drink whiskey with me. We'll just go that route for today. So That's what I'm going to be drinking tonight. So
Nice.
yeah.
I'd have
So
to try that. I haven't seen that bottle here, which is interesting. I guess that's something I noticed in the States. Like there's similar stuff, but there's different stuff when we were down, in April. Like there's
yeah,
stuff that we just don't have in Canada. And I'm sure if you came up here, there'd be the same thing, right? You'd see drinks that you just don't have.
I think that's true. I mean, even in the States, when I've traveled, to different places, like I went last fall to go visit my daughter in Syracuse, and we went and she did a little segment on this show with me, and there was all sorts of stuff I've never even heard of. So that was really fun. So you know what? We'll have to agree that when you come down to the States or I go up to Canada, we'll bring each other a cool bottle of whiskey. How about that?
Absolutely. I think that's a
Yeah.
great idea. Or,
Yeah.
or Scotch if we can find one, because I know now there's lots of new Scotch. I love Scotch too. My uncle introduced me to Scotch in 2007, and I've never gone back.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it. Just yeah, mellows you out. It really does. You don't have to drink a lot. Just chill out. And I do. And I think for most people, it's an acquired taste, which is kind of weird that was the first thing I really went to. But like I said, there's something to be said for genetics, I think, right?
I think so. And if you can start with Scotch, it's easy to go to whiskey, because the
Yeah.
Scotch is so much more, like you say, peaty. It's such a bolder, stronger taste. It is an acquired taste.
Yeah.
I have a friend of mine who swore off, he would never drink Scotch. And then for my last birthday, I got myself a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue.
Uh-huh.
And I let him try it, and now he'll drink Scotch, because if it's good Scotch like that, you want to
Mhm.
have it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's just for sipping, right? You're not taking shots of this stuff
Oh,
or something like that.
no.
I mean, I guess you could. You could if you really wanted, but it might burn a little bit going
It
down,
might,
right?
and it might end your
But
night a lot faster.
yeah, right. Right. Yeah. I was following a Facebook page that was all whiskey drinkers, right? And it was actually pretty cool because there was people across the spectrum. There were these really old Scottish dudes on there who would come on and school you on everything about Scotch. And then there'd be this random 22-year-old kid who'd be like, every time I drink whiskey, I get really wasted. And everyone would chime in and say, well, that's because you're drinking too much of it. It was like, is this guy for real? Or maybe he's just getting us, but yeah, it's pretty funny. It's you don't drink this stuff like that. But
No, it's like I have
anyway,
like a whiskey a night, and it lasts me an hour and a half, and I enjoy it. It's my sipping end of
yeah.
the day, chilling out thing to do, right? I can't smoke anymore, so I have
Yeah, see,
whiskey.
there you go. I think
Yeah.
it's perfect, and it does just that. And what's really funny, I had been drinking it for about 6 months, and over that time, I lost like 20 pounds. And so I told the world that it was because I was drinking whiskey. I'm like, it's the new diet drink,
It's perfect. It's a
but
dietary supplement.
right? Well, you know what? It you don't consume as many calories, right? It doesn't have the sugars in it that a lot of beers and everything do. So if you had been drinking, which I wasn't really a big drinker before, but I usually drank beer. Beer doesn't like me so much anymore, so I can't drink it as often. So I switched to whiskey. So
There you
I'm
go.
sticking to it. Here's to your good weight loss.
Cheers.
And here's to Ghost and all the cool things. Cheers to you. Or
Cheers.
as they say in Scotland, sláinte, right?
Sláinte. Oh yeah.
So I don't even know where to get started. Where to get started tonight, Jason, because you have so many cool things going on in your life, and I really want my viewers to get a feel for who you are. But maybe we can, for the fun of it, because it's where you and I met, let's chat for a minute about our investigation that we did here at Mix in Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah. That I
I
can't
mean,
believe that was like 2 months, more than 2 months ago already.
yeah, it has been 2 months. And you do a lot of investigations. What was your thought about that place that we were at and some of the stuff that we got?
It was interesting because we'd done like pubs before,
Mm-hmm.
but never like really a nightclub. And it was just, I think what really stuck out for me was the motion activated lights we had set up at the bar. And you
Yeah.
and Pete were asking questions, and so was, and I all the names have sort of escaping me at the moment. And then the manager was also talking, and we had the one on the floor and the one on the seat, and you guys were asking the one gentleman to come and sit down, and it's when
Mm-hmm.
that motion light went off that
Yeah.
that really has stuck with me, how that happened, and same with the one on the floor, and I think it did it a couple times from what I remember.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, and the fact that it did it 2 or 3 different times
Yeah.
when we kind of called out to that person, I think was really significant. That was pretty exciting. Um, and, you know, and to get someone's name, you know, the owner
Yeah,
of the bar, someone actually said her name.
that
That
was
was
wild.
that was pretty great. So I don't know about you, but I was kind of surprised at the amount of interaction that we got. And, you know, a lot of people watching this aren't that familiar with this kind of stuff other than watching it on TV, but we should just let them know that you can be in a place for hours and absolutely nothing at all happens, right?
Well, I think
So,
that's kind of what made that significant, to have, like, the name and the motion lights go off, and even, like, the personal sensations, like, sort of back towards the washroom areas that would come up. I mean,
mhm.
yeah, you can go to whole investigations and nothing happened. Like, I mean, literally nothing happens. You can be there all night.
Yeah.
Um, or you can come in and you can get, like, a few, like, one thing, like, you can get an EVP, or have, like, a motion thing go off, but to have multiple things go off, and we were only there maybe 4 or 5 hours, I think,
Yeah.
total.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Like, that is an active location, and the only thing that was kinda disappointing is when we got to Gooding, we had so much more happening at Gooding that it almost overshadowed it in a way, but that was a great way to get into, like, what was going on at Mix, and even upstairs at the VFW,
Oh,
location as
yes.
well, to be able to go up there and
Yeah.
investigate too, even quickly, I thought was really, really neat. But Mix was a good location. It was different, because there's no real stories attached in terms of people being killed inside the bar, really, or any, you know what I mean? Like, not like you, there wasn't like
Mhm.
this long list of stuff that would suggest that the place was haunted, but it was obviously a place that for the people who went there, it mattered to them. Hence, their
Yes.
spirits would come back. And I think that's something people don't realize either, is you don't need the creepy old house with the long history, tragic history, to be haunted. Spirits will travel, like we call them travelers, and or they will return to a place that brought them comfort. And that was very much, that was kind of, as I was kind of going over the footage, because it's going to become a future episode of We Want to Believe, that was something that really stuck out. That there was a story to that place, and it meant
Mhm.
something to the people that went there, and that's probably why it's haunted, for lack of a better word, right? What it was meant to those people.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great point, and it's all about connection. Speaks a lot to the owner of the bar and just the environment that was created in that space. But yeah, even a couple of cool EVPs on there. Yeah, it was that was really fun. I really had a great time, and I was honored to be able to investigate with you guys. And I have to admit, when Pete asked me to find a place, I was like, oh gosh, like, and I just kind of came across, I'm like, what if this place really sucks? Like, what if nothing happens? But that's just part of it, right? Sometimes it does suck, for
Well, it
lack of a
does, and
better term.
sometimes places that are supposed to have this wonderful history and all this stuff happening, like, we were kind of a bit hesitant with Gooding because we heard so many things about it, and it's been on, like, ghost adventures and all this, but a lot of those places you go to and nothing happens. Like, they're really duds.
Hmm.
It's more a reputation than anything. So it was neat to go to
Yeah.
a place that we hadn't heard about, and that was picked, and actually that had these alleged stories, but they were all, they paid off. Like, the evidence we got kind of corroborated everything we had heard about it, and that the manager told us kind of at the beginning. Like, we had stuff happen that fit the story that people had been told there, which is
Yeah.
great.
It really is great. And I mean, I think it it makes a difference sometimes too that we were the first to ever investigate there too, right? Like there's finally someone maybe going, oh my gosh, these people can hear me and see me and I can communicate with them. There's something about that, I think, too.
I agree. Like, there's a place here in Canada, that we investigate, called O'Keefe Ranch, and it's one of those that has lots of stories, and many investigative groups have been there, and pictures have been taken and stuff, and it's kind of, oh well, and we've done a couple of investigations there. Not much was going on, but we went into an attic of this building that had never been opened before. We were the first team to go into this attic, and that's when things started to happen. When we went into the attics, we were the first investigators ever to go into this attic. We got a woman screaming, and we got some other voices caught on EVP, and just these weird sensations. That I think you're right. I think if you have multiple groups and people going through a place, you know, if there's spirits there, they almost get like, ah, gosh, it's these people again. You know what I mean? And they don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
But you go somewhere new and they do, they're kind of interested, right? Or they finally, we can speak and someone's going to pay attention to us.
Yeah, for sure. I think that having Rita there helps. And, I think that ghosts are just, they were people. They still have personalities like people. And some of them don't have any interest in interacting with us sometimes, just like
True.
humans don't have that interest.
True. Or they get angry when you try to communicate with them. They tell you to F off or get out or something. And it's like, okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense, right? They're
Yeah.
having a bad
Which
day, maybe. Like,
you guys have had that happen a time or two, right? On your investigations
oh,
where
many
you've had
times.
someone. Yeah.
They hate me. Apparently, they keep telling me to go away, or yeah, all sorts of profanity's been thrown my way, which whatever, I don't get offended by it. Maybe I just give off a
Yeah,
vibe,
well,
I
why
don't know.
why would you, right? So you remember Sandy, the owner of the bed and breakfast? She's listening in. She's
Hey, Sandy.
expressed. Yeah, she's listening. Uh, Isaiah just says antisocial ghosts. Absolutely, those there are there
Of
are
course
those.
there are.
Why would there not be? Sandy says, "Hey, back." So let's chat then. You mentioned that's super cool that mix could be a future episode on the show. So tell everybody about what's happening with We Want to Believe real quick.
Yeah, like it started off as a YouTube series, first on Joe Blow Horror
Mhm.
Originals, and then it became part of the Paranormal Network, which I managed for about a year and a half before they decided just not to continue it. So we'd had a number of episodes that were broadcast, and we'd
Mhm.
shot a year's worth of as well that nothing had happened yet, right? Because when it ended, it kind of just ended, and we were always filming 6 months to 8 months in advance, because it takes time to edit and everything like that. So we had a bunch of stuff that hadn't been shot, and then we kind of, as we kept investigating, we kept filming of
Mhm.
no idea what we were really going to do.
Yeah.
And so back in, we were Peter and I guess sort of to back it up. So we had a bunch of episodes that had aired, and a bunch that we didn't know what we were going to do with, or what if we were going to do a show, or maybe do a feature documentary, or maybe do nothing. And we ended up working with a gentleman named Jason Kenzie, who's a filmmaker out of Vancouver, British Columbia. He mostly does kind of Bigfoot, like searching for Sasquatch stuff that's been on
Mhm.
Amazon and Tubby and things like that. And he and I connected sort of through a third party. Um, and he was like, "Well, I really want to do like a series of called Paranormal Adventures. And would you be interested in if I followed you along to an investigation kind of thing?" And so we agreed to do that. And he came up and he's like, "Well, if you have anyone, like he's going to bring his camera stuff, but do you know anyone who could maybe film alongside?" And I said, "Well, we have our guy Marcus, who is a shot a lot of the We Want to Believes and etc. I know the guy named Todd." So we did a couple investigations with him for his show. And we were kind of wrapping up the last one we did, the second one, which was at Bailey House. We were kind of like, "Well, where's this going to run?" And he was talking, "Well, it's going to run on Paraflix." They decided they wanted to pick it up. And Paraflix is like a streaming platform, like so many of them out
Mhm.
there, but it's paranormal focused. And I was like, "Really?" And I'd kind of heard of it, but never really watched anything on it. So I kind of got a subscription and checked it out. And I was like, "Okay, this is some pretty good stuff on here." And, mixed bag kind of thing. And I just emailed them, the CEO, named Natalie. And I said, "Well, we have a show. We're looking for a home. Here's kind of the playlist of what kind of ran. What do you think?" And like, she was really excited and met with Peter and I. And sort of we had a couple of meetings. We put together a pilot. So we kind of re-edited together a couple of stuff that had already run and sent it to them with longer credits and everything. And they loved it. And so now June 30th, our first season is going to come out with sort of 6 episodes of We Want to Believe, which are ones that have already been out there in YouTube form, but we've repurposed them and put them together to be more of like a TV format.
Mhm.
So there's going to be 6 episodes that are going to run weekly starting June. And then they do this thing called Horror-tober or Horror Flicks, which is Halloween stuff. So we've got
Oh,
3 special
fun.
episodes that are going to come out around Halloween. And then depending on how that goes, we've already got a second season of a whole bunch of stuff that's already been shot that I've kind of scripted and created edits for and everything that our editor's working on, which will be like a season 2. And we've been filming the stuff lately, like we went to, Coeur d'Alene and Gooding, and the stuff that we shot with the Jason Kenzie guy, our own footage, that'll end up being, God willing, season 3, if all goes according to plan. So that's kind of what happened with We Want to Believe.
That is so great. That's super exciting. So just remind everybody, Paraflix. So you want
Yeah,
to go
Paraflix.
find that. So
And
June 30th, the first episode. And I think I actually looked it up. It's like $3.99 a month. So it
it's
doesn't break
cheap.
the bank. It's
It
probably
doesn't
got
break
some
the bank.
cool stuff.
Lots of stuff, lots of content on it. Um, and that you can find it everywhere, Android, on Apple TV, Roku, the app stores. It's all over the place, which is great. So they're really kind of picking up steam. And what's nice is that we're kind of a Paraflix exclusive, but after so long, we can also start shopping the show out to like other streaming platforms as well, which is
Oh
good.
yeah.
So we own the rights to the show, which is great. Like we still own the rights to We Want to Believe and everything that's related to it. They just want first crack at whatever we do, and after like a month, we can start putting, as long as it's got the Paraflix Presents on it, it can go out onto other platforms as well. So we're pretty happy about
Yeah.
that. There's a lot of
Yeah.
places, if you make a deal with them, that's it. Like they own your show, they can kind of dictate to you what you can do, and you can't show it anywhere else. But they were really good about us retaining ownership of We Want to Believe, because we want it. For those who haven't seen it, it's kind of the anti Ghost Adventures and shows like that. Like it's not a reality show. Like a lot of them, it is a documentary series. And so
Yes.
if we go to a place and we
Mhm.
investigate and nothing happens, then that episode nothing happens. But we explain our process, the history of the location. We interview people, and we explain why maybe we didn't get anything. And then if something does happen, then that becomes, that's like icing on the cake, right? So
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. And just so everyone knows, this show is very much one of a kind, and it really just kind of it illustrates what paranormal investigating really is like. Um, yeah, I actually, one of the things I want to add, I think I mentioned to you that I want to start a tour here in Coeur d'Alene, a ghost tour, hauntings, whatever. But with my Whisper team back in Washington, a couple of us started doing tours, and one of the aspects of that tour was at each location we shared a one of the aspects of an investigation, whether it was mapping, just these different things that we do for the sake of educating the public about what this is. Because I mean, it's really been confusing to people to watch shows like Ghost Adventures and even Ghost Hunters, things that try really hard. Kindred Spirits, they try really hard, but I think it's great that you guys have some flexibility there, that you have the opportunity to present it, and it's not a reality show, but it's real. It's
yes.
very real. So
And that's something Peter was really adamant about when the whole thing started, because Peter Renn, he's been approached by people like Netflix and stuff to do shows, but with any of them, I think they all start with the best of intentions, but they are in the business of, entertaining people, and people want to see ghosts and they want to see scary things. So I think there's a lot of pressure to present that in some
yeah.
way, shape, or form. And then many of those shows have been accused of faking evidence or scenarios. And so he didn't want to do that. And so that was kind of the real crux when we were approached to be on Joe Blow Horror Originals. It's like, well, okay, but we're not faking anything. We're just going to show people what happened and show it like it really is. And so we've been really good at that. And the episodes where there isn't so much going on, we like to let the story of the location come through, or our personalities come through, or talk about the equipment and how it works, to educate people on what this is all about and make it not
Yeah.
scary. Because I think when people watch, and I like watching those reality shows too, they're fun, right? But
Mhm. Yeah.
they'll have you believing that every haunted place is spooky and that there's demons everywhere and that you're really at risk all the time. I've had maybe one terrifying thing happen to me in my entire 20 years of doing this. You know what I mean? But it was so out of
Yeah.
left field and so not the norm. Even when I get sworn at, it's like, whatever.
Yeah.
It's just it is. It's not scary. And they're not out there to hurt you most of the time. I think they're just
No,
trying to communicate.
I absolutely. I think, I mean, I believe that if you do feel like you get pushed or touched or even scratched, I think it must be really hard to get our attention from the other side. That's what I think. And so sometimes it feels aggressive, but it really, really, really isn't. I want to take a second just to respond to some of these comments. Uh, First of all, Pete says hello to his favorite people. I don't know if you can see these. Can you see these
No, I
comments
can't.
coming
Hello,
in?
Pete.
um, and Jonas and his son Isaiah are listening in, and they really like your posters. Just so
Oh,
you
cool.
know,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
they're going off about the Pulp Fiction and all that in the background. So, yeah. So I just think that's funny. But they're also listening. They're listening. His son's like, "Oh my gosh, he has cool posters." I'm like, "Yeah, he does."
I
Yeah.
like to collect movie posters, so.
Sweet. I saw on your Facebook post, what was the recent one that you acquired?
Oh, I
There was
got a
something cool.
Halloween Kills poster signed by James Jude Courtney, who plays one of the two actors that plays Michael Myers in the films. And I got
Oh,
a Friday
wow.
the 13th Part 8 signed by Kane Hodder, who also was like one of the more popular Jasons out there in the Friday the 13th films. So
That is super cool. So, have you always been into horror films? Is there a particular kind of horror film you like?
yeah, I've always been into film, like since Star Wars, since my parents took me to see
Hmm.
Star Wars at a drive-in back in the 70s, giving my age out a bit there, but I saw it when it was brand new, and that just ruined me for life. I just like movies. That's why I got my film degree. And I do like horror and action movies are like my two favorite genres.
Hmm.
Um, and for horror, I mean, I like all kinds, but I like the slasher, like Halloween. John Carpenter's Halloween is my favorite. My absolute
Cool.
all-time favorite horror movie. Jaws, I guess technically, but it's not like technically a horror film. Like Jaws is my favorite film, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no,
But yeah, I love
totally.
Carpenter's Halloween, and I love the franchise, even the bad ones. And I like the spooky ones too, like The Changeling, the George C. Scott movie
Hmm.
from 1980. That's I think one of the best haunted house movies ever made. Um,
Cool.
and I like it when they try to show what ghost hunting is like, but they always have to, of course, do the big special effects ending, which always kind of ruins things a bit. But if they can kind of do accurately show paranormal investigations in a film, I think that's kind of neat as well. At least they try. I think the first Conjuring kind of got it a little bit right. You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
wasn't, until the end, and then the 2 and 3 just kind of lost the rails. We could go on about the Warrens all we want, and it'd be a whole other show.
I was just gonna
Um,
say we could talk about Ed and Lorraine Warren for ages, just expressing our own opinions about what they do.
we
I
could
don't
very,
know.
very easily. I know Pete's got his too. So
Yeah, but you know what? Here's my take on all of it, though. Like, I think that people believe what they believe, right? And that is just what it is. There can't be all this weird judgment that happens even in the paranormal field of people because they believe different things or they go about things differently. We don't know what's real and what's right and what's happening, right? So it's
no,
all
we
kind of
don't.
fascinating and fun to me.
It is like I know Ralph Sarchie. Who they made a movie based on one of his book, Deliver Us from Evil. There's that movie that Eric Bana was in. Eric Bana
Yeah.
played Ralph Sarchie. Ralph Sarchie's actually a real guy. That movie's pretty much 100% BS. And he wrote a book called Beware the Night that was then called Deliver Us from Evil when the movie came out. And I remember I read the book and it was interesting. And Ralph approaches it. He's a religious demonologist, so he's a Catholic. So that's
Hmm.
his approach, right? Um,
Yeah.
and so, and then the movie came out. And it was nothing like the book, and I was really upset. But it was kind of neat. I've met Ralph like virtually, and he that's what he approaches it from a Catholic standpoint.
Hmm.
And who's to say that he's wrong, right? I don't. I approach it as scientifically as possible.
Hmm.
Bring in a little bit of spirituality when necessary, but in terms of like we'll do like seances, to investigate and use Ouija boards and stuff a bit. But we're much more scientific, and that's our approach. But no one way is wrong. It's just a different way of looking at things, and so I respect where he comes from, and people that others I know other people who investigate the same way, right? I mean, they call things demons. I don't like, you know what I mean? We have negative cases. It's all good. We're all
Yeah.
trying to do the same thing.
You know what? It really is true. I mean, you do get in that point with certain TV programs where you wonder how much embellishing is happening. But yeah, I mean, you and I can probably talk for hours over whiskey about all of
Yeah, we
this,
could.
right?
Like we are now.
So, we could be here.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that you've been doing this, I think, for 20 years.
Yep.
So I mean, you are a filmmaker, but how did this become interesting to you? Like paranormal investigating and all the crazy creatures of the world that people don't want to believe in.
I got it. Well, I like a lot of people. I had stuff happen when I was younger, as a kid
Hmm.
growing up that I can't explain. I had kind of two big events go on that really threw me for a loop. One was when I was about 5 or 6, and I was in the back of my mom's hatchback, parked on a road we'd gone to pick up a friend of mine who was going to sleep over, and I, for whatever reason, stayed in the vehicle, and she went out to get my friend and talk to the mom and that kind of stuff. And I remember, even though it's been a long time, I remember sitting in the back of the vehicle, looking out the back hatchback at the road, and there's no one on the road. And suddenly this face appears in the back. It doesn't come up, like someone kind of coming up like that. It just appears. And it's a horrible, terrifying, mongoloidish face. And it's there and it's gone. But it scared me. And I remember dropping to the floor and not wanting to come up. I didn't want to see it again till I heard footsteps come up. And it was my mom and my friend. And I asked them, were you guys around the vehicle? And they're like, no, there's no one around, kind of thing. And I didn't hear any footsteps coming up either, to, thinking back. And I said, well, I saw this. And my mom was a teacher and thought I was, making it up or just having a big imaginative moment. And my friend didn't have anything to do with it. But that kind of really stuck with me. And I kind of started getting interested in it. So when shows like In Search Of would come on, I'd watch those and I'd find books and read them. You know what I mean? Lloyd Orbach wrote a book about being a paranormal or parapsychologist. So I remember reading that. And then when I was about 13 or 14, my family had a cabin on a lake, a nearby lake up here. And it's, for people who are into it, we're in Sasquatch country up here. And there's a lot of indigenous tribes and they'll have their belief systems and many different forest spirits. And we were free range kids. So I'd always bring a friend out to the lake with me. And as long as we were back for, lunch and dinner and bedtime, that's fine. And we'd been out adventuring, coming back to the cabin. And there's only really one route in and out that we would take. And there's all these stands of trees. And we kind of came back and ate dinner and all that and cleaned and did the dishes. And we wanted to go out for one last adventure. So we're taking the same route out. We're passing these trees that we had passed an hour earlier, and they're pine trees. And always, the whole time I've ever been out there on that route, the ground is littered with pine needles, dead pine needles. But on this time going out after dinner, all the pine needles were gone. There was a fire pit and like this lean-to built and dug into the ground a bit, set up with a roof, and in it was a bone. And it wasn't there an hour earlier. And me and my buddy Mike are looking at this and like, this is weird. The sun's starting to set. We're getting a little bit creeped out and everything. It's like, let's just go back to the cabin. Like, just go. Went back to the cabin, but we couldn't stop talking about it. So as soon as we woke up the next morning, even before breakfast, we threw our stuff on. We went running back up to that spot. All of it was gone, and the ground was completely littered with pine needles again. Dead pine needles. Like it was nothing had ever been there. And had I not had someone else there, and had he and I not consistently talked about that over the last 35 years, I would have thought I got knocked on the head and imagined it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is really intriguing. Like Sasquatch, something smarter. Like, so that makes me think though, what do you, Sasquatch, I know that you've done some investigations with the Canadian Paranormal Society and done that stuff. What do you think Sasquatch is? Everyone has kind of a different idea.
Yeah, and I was someone that was on if Sasquatch was real, I was on the Flesh and Blood camp forever. But I remember when we were filming one of our Sasquatch hunts, we had a gentleman named Chris Bowes, who's an indigenous storyteller and artist. And I was telling him about that experience I had with the lean-to and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, dude, that was the little people. And I'm like, what do you mean the little people? And I said, well, all this stuff, these things are dimension walkers. So the little people are the guys that go out and they're like scouts and they kind of look around, right? Because Sasquatch is, I guess, supposed to be more of a nocturnal kind of thing. And if they can't make it back to the cave or across the portal in time, they camp out and then they leave. It's kind of the next day kind of thing. And he says, that's what you ran across. And they're not very nice and they're quite malicious little bastards. So it's a good thing that you left when you did, sort of thing. And it was just, so I'm like, yeah, and I've had weird stuff happen out of that cabin a few times, like with lights, and then this intense feeling of dread coming out of nowhere and actually leaving. Like I would leave. I refused to stay in the cabin when that feeling came around. And I only had it twice in the whole time we ever owned the place. So I'm beginning to think that Sasquatch is something more of a spiritual thing. And if we see it in its physical form, we're lucky, right? Like that's why it's so rarely seen. And that's why there are no bodies. Like I'm not saying 100%. I don't like explaining an unknown with an unknown, but the more research I've done into stuff like Sasquatch and, Ogopogo, because I'm writing a book on Ogopogo and stuff like that, which is our kind of Loch Ness monster here in Canada. The First Nations believe these are all spirits. And I'm kind of leaning towards that. Like the paranormal investigator in me kind of says, yeah, why not?
Yeah. You know what? I agree with that. For a long time, the same as you, kind of thought, well, of course there's probably a biological species out there that we haven't found yet. That's perfectly realistic, really. But the more I've read and the more I've looked into that, I too believe that they are spiritual, interdimensional. They're passing through different planes and coming here. That's why we don't see them very often. That's why they don't leave everything behind all the time. Um, yeah, I'm with you. And there's a lot of weird evidence out there where there's other phenomenon that happens when Sasquatch are sighted, like lights in the air and things like that. So I'm in
Mhm.
that same camp too. I think that, I mean, and for some of us, it's easier to be in that camp. It's hard for other people to go there. But yeah, I'm with you on that. I think they're way more sophisticated and way more evolved and involved than we want to believe they are, and just way smarter than we are.
I think so, and I mean, you could be in the woods, and especially if it's not like always a flesh and blood thing. If maybe it takes that form sometimes, but you could be within feet of one, and you would never know it was there, right? And if
Yeah.
they want you to know that they're there, they let you know. Like I said, I remember being in the cabin, happened twice. One minute everything's fine, and the next, like all the hair goes up on the back of my neck, and I'm completely like, my body starts shaking, and I'm completely freaked out. And so I packed up and I would leave, and that sensation would last a good half hour on the drive back. And it's happened twice, and it's just like, why?
Hmm.
Right?
Well,
Unless
I've met a couple of people who claim that they have communicated telepathically with Sasquatch. And I mean, these are people that I find trustworthy and have no reason not to believe, who are uh claim to be psychics and whatever. But I think that kind of makes sense if you look at them from that angle, that they would probably be able to communicate with certain people in those different ways. I've also heard that they smell really badly.
it's supposed to
So
be
I'm not.
horrible, horrible
Yeah.
smelling.
Yeah.
Horrible, right?
So
Yeah, I've heard people
I
too that have had telepathic incidences that have, like, been following them with FLIRs, like the infrared cameras, and that the image just disappears right in front of them, like they just
Oh
left the
yeah.
plane of existence,
Yeah.
right?
There's, yeah, I think there has to be something to that for sure. So yeah, I don't know. I've yet to be able to go on a Sasquatch investigation, but it's on my bucket list. I want very much to do that sometime. But I want to segue into Ogopogo, because
Mm.
that was one of your most recent big adventures that you took. And am I correct that is that the subject for your current book that you're writing?
The one that I'm writing, yeah, it's one I've
Yeah.
kind of always wanted to write, and it was kind of funny. Like, I decided I wanted to write an Ogopogo book about the same time I was approached by Eli Watson, who's part of Small Town Monsters. They're a documentary company out of the
Hmm.
States, and they focus on, small town monster stories, right? And I'm a big fan of their stuff, Seth Breedlove and all that. And they were all coming up to British Columbia, and they were going to do. They did a doc. They were doing a Bigfoot documentary called The Origin. So it's all because Harrison Hot Springs here is kind of where the name Sasquatch originated from, and a lot of the early research, like John Green and all that. And Eli was a
Hmm.
part of that, but he was also kind of given, because he does a series called Mysteries and Monsters. And so, well, he
Okay.
was up there. He's like, he wanted to come and do one of his episodes on Ogopogo. So as I was starting to not edit, but research this book, he's like, hey, Jay, I'm coming up. Because he and I had known each other off and on, like, for a few years now. I never met. He's like, I'm coming up, and I'm going to do a episode on Ogopogo. He's like, do you want to come? And I'm like, yeah, I can't say no. Like, and so it was a
Of
great chance
course.
to meet each other. And,
Yeah.
and so
So
the stuff I've written for the book and the interviews I was lining up worked so that we could line it up for his shoot as well. So we spent, like, 3 days doing his Ogopogo documentary, and a lot of that's going to end up in the book as well. And then I ended up going down and being interviewed for On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Origin as well, which I thought was kind of neat.
that is really neat. So you mentioned Ogopogo's like the Loch Ness of Canada. Tell my audience a little about it, because I personally am not that familiar. So tell us a little bit about this creature.
Well, like, again, it's interesting because, like Loch Ness, Lake Okanagan, which is here in the interior of British Columbia, is a long,
Hmm.
narrow lake. It's a glacial lake. It was formed, during the last ice age. Geographically, they're almost at the same latitude, even like you can almost line them up
Oh,
in this
uh-huh.
line. And what people don't know about Loch Ness is a lot of people associate it with, like, they say, well, it's this plesiosaur, right? Kind of thing. But that's only
Mm-hmm.
because of the surgeon's photo. Actually, a lot of the Loch Ness sightings equate it to be like Ogopogo, which is this long serpentine creature with kind of a forked tail like a whale and a head that's kind of like a horse or a goat or a dog with these little horns, which is what a lot of lake monsters and sea monsters are supposed to look like. And it was spotted by our indigenous people long before European settlers showed up. And they would sort of if they were going out on the lake, they'd kind of pay their respects to it, through giving of tobacco or an offering kind of thing like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when European settlers kind of came in, they kind of saw this, mistook that for sacrifices, you know what I mean? And started building up this ferocious monster story. And then there was a big cultural misappropriation of the creature. Like in Kelowna, they've taken it and turned it into this tourist attraction, and they call it Augie, and they sell the image on t-shirts and everything like that. And there's this statue of it in the park that I remember seeing as a kid, but it's very much an important part of the indigenous culture of the area. They call it Nahatik. And I'm mangling the translation right there, even by trying to say it, but it's the water spirit. That's
Mm-hmm.
literally what it is. Like, Coralie Miller, who's part of West Bank First Nations, who we interviewed for the book and for the documentary, would tell them, no, it's a water spirit. If you see it in a physical form, again, you're lucky, like with Bigfoot or anything.
Mm-hmm.
It is the water. And if you want to catch Ogopogo, take a cup, walk down to the lake, scoop out a cup of water, and you've got Ogopogo. It's in your cup.
That's a great story. That I'm honestly have not ever heard much about that. And I love how you mentioned that that these two lakes seem to kind of correspond on the earth. And I wonder scientifically how that contributes. I often think about Loch Ness Monster. I know a lot about that. I was born in the UK, and know and just pay attention a lot to that. And so many people have seen these creatures. There has to be something to them, absolutely, right? And so sometimes for a long time I think, well, is it possible that whatever they are, if they are plesiosaurs or whatever, these ancient kind of dinosaurs that live probably in the depths of the oceans? I'm sure there are some crazy creatures that live in the depths of the oceans that we know nothing about. Maybe there's tunnels where they get in and out. But I really do at this point, think more of it, as you've mentioned, as these spiritual creatures, as interdimensional beings that show themselves to us in ways that are meaningful, maybe that we don't understand. That's actually where I've come, just in general, to paranormal experiences, and how I kind of want to focus my own investigating techniques is around the idea that not the what you are experiencing, but let's get at the why you are experiencing what you are experiencing.
And
What
I
do you
think,
what are your thoughts on that?
yeah, no, I think that's a big thing. Pete and I have some plans that we can kind of test these theories a bit. But
Mm-hmm.
I think we contribute to what we're experiencing in some way. I guess that would be where parapsychology kind of comes into it. And
Yes.
there's a bit of a story here. Like one of the people that I interviewed for the book, and that we ended up interviewing on camera for Eli's show. They had a sighting. They had a sighting of Ogopogo that and they actually snapped a picture of it, and it made the rounds in last October. And she was saying like her mother had died the day before, and she didn't want to go out sailing that day. And so she kind of just said to the universe that day, just give me something to take my mind off my grief, if even for a little
Mm-hmm.
while. And then within a few hours, they have this sighting. They take this picture. You know what I mean? It goes
Mm-hmm.
semi-viral, and it worked, kind of thing, right? So I think we influence these experiences and see these things for a reason.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
there's kind of a lesson in it for us if we can unravel the why of it all, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think it's funny you mentioned earlier, pe- uh, people using their faith or whatnot. Like, we all believe in that. I was raised Catholic, and I've heard a lot of stories throughout my life about Mother Mary appearing to people, or this and that. And I think that spirits show themselves to us in a way that we can be accepting of them. I think it's the same way that sometimes people see ghosts of people who passed when they were 92, but we see them when they're 7, or we
Mhm.
see them when they're 22, and people see ghosts at ages that don't seem to make sense to them as far as when they died. But for whatever reason, that's how they present themselves to us, because that's how we might accept what is happening in that moment. Um, I don't know. It's really fascinating. It's fun to just kind of talk and speculate about why that is. But I think one of the things I've found in organizations is, and it makes sense, right? As a paranormal investigation, especially if we go into somebody's home, we're going to kind of do a little vetting, right? We're not going to go into someone who has serious drug addiction or mental illness. But I also think that we're doing, to a certain degree, doing people a disservice by assuming that the experiences that they're having are because of those mental illnesses or because of those drugs. And so I've always like kind of contemplating like, how can I work around that and be safe and also not get myself into a weird situation? But I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? Like, where does like mental illness or that end, and some of these different things start? And I guess I think I'm most curious about this. This is just coming off of my head because I had an uncle who was diagnosed schizophrenic, but I know for years and years and years was seeing things that I see now, like I kind of wonder. And granted, I know he did some LSD when he was in college, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But like, I don't know, where are we, like, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that kind of thing, like how we diagnose people and kind of brush them off because they have these other habits, and we don't kind of dive in. And I guess that's where it's just that side of me that wants to support humanity and help them understand and heal from stuff, right? Like, this is a really random question, but I feel like you might have some thoughts on it.
I think it's like, I mean, yeah, when we investigate, if people, we kind of look into history of mental illness or addiction, right? And we
Hmm.
tend to shy away from those, I think, just because, well, for safety issues, one thing for sure,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Because we're not like trained combatants, or or addiction counselors or anything like that. I mean, I've done that kind of work,
Yeah.
but so I think we tend to stay away from that. And then you've also do have to take things reported by people with those issues with a bit of a grain of salt. That being said, I think this is kind of the way I have to look at it. When we are young, our minds are open and we talk about things that we see. Like my
Hmm.
son would talk about how there was two spirits on our house that live in the wall and that would, bother the dog kind of thing and come out. And this house, I've had experiences in this house that we live in. And I can
Hmm.
remember him going in when he was crying in the middle of the night one night to go in and comfort him. And he was standing in his crib and just pointing at this empty corner, just like this, and just screaming at it.
Yeah.
Right. I think at a certain age, we can see things and we're more open to this. And then when
Hmm.
we get old, that kind of comes back a bit. And people say you're being senile, or something, or you're seeing stuff. No, I think what happens is we get to a point in life where we get educated and churched and society has its way with us where we stop paying attention and we get
Hmm.
busy too. And if stuff happens, we just shrug it off or ignore it. But I think this stuff's there all of the time. And I know there's a period in my life where I closed it off and I didn't want to deal with this stuff at all.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
stopped paying attention. And then one day I couldn't help it. I started paying attention again. And I guess to answer your question, I think that there are people who are kind of more dialed into it. And I think when you allow yourself to be in kind of like people talk about taking mushrooms and having these profound
Hmm.
experiences that you can't shrug off. I think it's because
Hmm.
they've opened their mind. The mushrooms have allowed all the walls that have been put up to go away. But I think you don't need to take a drug to do that. I think if you just allow yourself to be open and receptive, you can experience this stuff whenever you want. And I know Pete and I have talked a lot about this too, where you almost have to kind of put a wall up just to prevent yourself because you see it all the time. Like I see stuff every day and I'm not
Yeah.
nuts. You know what I mean? But I have little things that
Yeah.
go on where I know something's around when it's around.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, and I think people who have these experiences get other people look at them and they say, well, he has this mental condition maybe, or it's because he does, smokes dope sometimes. I think people get falsely labeled with having mental
Mm-hmm.
health issues when maybe they don't, or maybe because they are depressed or dealing with PTSD, that's allowed them that barrier to come down a bit. If that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like I
Oh
think,
yeah.
so I mean, I think that plays a part in it too. So I think I think those experience, and maybe spirits are attracted to people who have had other traumatic experiences and are dealing with it. Maybe they see that as someone who is maybe more open to paying attention to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's just it's one of those things that goes around in my head all the time when you think about the why and trying, like, if you're having someone who's having these breakdowns and are able to connect with them and go, "Hey, I see weird shit all the time too."
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm crazy. So maybe if you just, I guess that's kind of that approach is maybe I am crazy because I see weird stuff all the time, but I
But
don't,
I don't think so. I think there's a writer named Colin Wilson who wrote a book called The Occult, and he did all of his spent years researching it, and he calls it Faculty X, and he says it's just this thing that we have where we're in tune with the world around us more. It's what helped us to survive when we were like hunter gatherers, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would be like,
Mm-hmm.
a sixth sense. So you'd kind of know where to look for food, or you'd know when danger is around. And we learned to listen to it. And it was not really paranormal. It was normal. But as soon as we became more civilized and cultured and gathered in societies and cities, we just stopped paying attention to it. And I think that's really all it is. Um, I think the paranormal, all this stuff that we call the paranormal, is as normal as anything else. It's just we live in a world where we just discredit it because we've shifted too much in the realm of science, which is
Yeah.
nothing wrong with science. But I think, now that we're doing quantum physics and people are looking at string theory and, multiverse theory, I think science is slowly coming around to seeing this other side of things, and maybe they will
Mm-hmm.
start paying more attention, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I mean, I think that's what we're doing when we go into our investigations, right? We're using the most scientific methods we can, recording things over and over and over again, or using all these things to say this does exist, this thing that people have been experiencing since the dawn of human civilization. It really is a thing, and it doesn't have to be scary,
No,
which is a big deal too, because people are really freaked out about it.
and I
um,
think that's where, because of how it's portrayed, right, in
mhm.
media and things like that. But it's normal. And there may have been a time where we weren't so scared of it, because it happened all the time where
Yeah,
we
no,
noticed.
I believe that. I believe, yeah, I mean, if you think of like druids and pagans and, people of centuries ago, that was just something that they believed in, from everything from fairies to Sasquatch to, what have you, elementals, all of these things. And even cultures today, right, where people just believe in all of that stuff and it's
Yeah.
part of what they are. On that subject, what is, you've done the Ogopogo, you've done Sasquatch, you've done ghosts. Is there other cryptids or these kind of fascinating creatures that you'd love to be able to go out and investigate? What other ones are kind of fascinating to you?
Those are the biggies, like Bigfoot and Ogopogo are kind of the two
Mhm.
big ones. I don't know why, but I am interested in Mothman.
Yes,
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
me
I just
too.
find the story, like, I've read John Keel's book, The Mothman Prophecies, and, watched the movie, and I know
Hmm.
that there was a lot of sightings out of Chicago. I find that really interesting. I don't know, it'd be a harder, I guess you'd have to go to Point Pleasant, to the
Yeah.
area where they've had all where the sightings were kind of that were just out of town, and we'd probably approach it like we do any of our investigations with our EVP, our digital recorders and spirit box and stuff like that, and just see if we can tap into
Hmm.
whatever that presence is. I think it's kind of interesting. UFOs have a bit of a fascination with me, like not as much as I think with other people. But a buddy of mine and I, we go sky watching. Like we'll kind of park ourselves out of town and sit in chairs and look at the sky and see if we can kind of see anything.
Yeah.
I'm curious about, when it comes to that kind of stuff, if it's like outer space or inner space, is that more dimensional traveling that's going on? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I'm curious about that. And like a lot of people who do my work, I'd love to go to Skinwalker Ranch.
You know
just
what?
to
I
see it.
would absolutely love to go there too. And it's funny, I feel like the TV shows that have happened there for some reason give people a weird taste in their mouth about that place, but I think there's some amazing stuff happening there. That place needs to be investigated over and over again.
I
Yeah.
agree, and I read George Knapp's book they wrote with someone else whose name escapes me right now. That's when the NIDS investigation was going on there over the years, and it was fascinating. And I mean, it just sounds like it's like this. If you're talking about dimensional stuff, this sounds like that's where the nexus point for a lot of this is. There seems to be multiple doors because everything's happening there. Like
Yeah,
poltergeist,
no.
this have to be monsters, orbs, like real orbs, like not like the kind that people mistake dust for,
No. Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
thing.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's truly fascinating. And I love George Knapp. I grew up watching him on TV, on the news, because I grew up, I spent many years in Las Vegas. And he was always for a long time doing kind of that, you know, around the edges kind of reporting on things. So it's kind of gets me excited when I see him doing these cool reports. But I'm with you on Skinwalker Ranch. I think that there's some fascinating stuff happening there. And I love that, they have scientists there trying to grab that and figure out
Yeah.
what it is. Yeah, I think that's the way to go about it, to be honest.
And
So,
true to form too, even the scientists have said, like, they've had cameras set up and they're by their cameras and they've seen these doorways just open in the sky
mhm.
and things come out of it. They've watched it happen, but then they review the footage. The footage just picks up this little orange blob and they can't see anything. And, because I think this stuff likes to mess with our cameras and our electronics and all that kind of stuff, right? Like, it's an
I think
intelligence. Whatever
so.
this is highly intelligent and it's probably smarter than we are.
Yeah. We don't like to admit that, though. Human beings like to be full of themselves, right?
Yes, we
Uh,
sure do, but I don't think we need to be, nor do we deserve to be.
yes. You mentioned UFOs being of interest. Have you ever had an experience that made you go, hmm?
Never. That's the thing that gets me. I've never had really a UFO experience at all. That's the one thing I haven't probably really had an experience with is UFOs. So I
Yeah.
think it'd be neat to have one, maybe. Um, but yeah, no, nothing. I've never even really seen one that I could pass off as being that I couldn't figure out what it was. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. That's what I did. My first show of the season last week was on UFOs. And I kind of went that angle because all of that's transpired since the last time I did a show with the Navy and the government coming out
Mhm.
with all these. And I have had some experiences with things that I would label unidentified flying objects. I've had three in particular, and one was when I was in high school in Las Vegas. So I don't know. That one, Sasquatch, ghosts. Those are kind of at the top of my list. UFOs, Sasquatch, and ghosts, and just wanting to get to know more about all of those things. So
And I think,
fun.
like, I mean, people who've had abduction experiences have said they've seen Sasquatches on UFOs, right?
Hmm.
And who's to say that people think what are aliens aren't ghosts? So, yeah, I think this is all kind of intermingled somehow in some way. It's all kind of
Yeah,
one big phenomenon.
I think it really is, and it's funny on this show how I find that these conversations just kind of are entangled. Even when we talk about uh, angels, people who believe in angels and what that really means to people, and how those are probably just some interdimensional beings that just know more about us than we know about
Yep.
ourselves. It's just lots of really, really cool conversation. I mean, I don't know, it's fun. It's a lot of fun, but I'm looking at the time, Jason. We're coming up on our hour, and I
Wow.
usually try to keep it. I know it goes by fast, huh?
It sure does. I was like, holy crap.
I know. But like I said, we could talk about this stuff. People like you and me could talk about this stuff for days.
Oh, for
And
easy
yeah,
days.
yeah, for sure. But I know you said you have something coming up in a little while, so you might want a little break before then. But I want to make sure everyone who's listening, June 30th on Paraflix, go out and get the app. You can stream the new season of We Want to Believe, which is going to be super fun. Check out some of Jason's books. Really quickly, Jason, tell us the names of some of your books so folks can kind of reach out and look for those. I've actually read a couple, but I'll let you tell people what they are.
There's three currently. The first one's called I Want to Believe, One Man's Journey into the Paranormal, and that's where I tell Peter Renn's story, who of course
Hmm.
is our mutual friend and has been a guest here. that he and I
Yeah.
both wrote. Our second book that he and I worked on together is called I Want to Believe, an Investigator's Archive. And of course, that's where we interviewed many different paranormal investigators, some that have been on TV, some that people haven't heard of. We got some cryptozoologists in there. So that was kind of this compilation. It's just telling all their stories and what got them into it. And then our third book is called Dying Light, and it's an investigation into near-death experiences where we had decided to step off and do something a bit different. And you can find them all on Amazon, and they are from Beyond the Fray Publishing.
Nice. That's awesome. So, oh my gosh. I mean, there's so many things you have going on, but we touched on some of them tonight. So you guys, everyone who's listening and who listens later, thanks for joining us tonight. And please do check out Jason's work. The books he just mentioned, check out We Want to Believe on Paraflix starting June 30th. And his new book will be coming out. When do you anticipate that?
It's taking forever to write, but I'm hoping by the end of the year it'll come out.
I got it. Okay, cool. Yeah. Ooh, it popped you off for a second. I think it's like,
I'm
hey.
here. I'm still here.
Here you are. I don't even know what just happened. It's the ghost talking to us. All of a sudden you weren't there. I'm like, wait, where'd he go? So anyway, maybe really quickly, before you go, there's a lot of people chiming in right now, but anyone out there have a question or anything they want to explain? A lot of people giving you huge kudos and thanks for being on the show tonight.
Oh, cool. Thank you, everyone. It's been great to be here.
So that's fun. And like I have told other guests, sometimes it takes a minute for these to come in, but if I get questions for you after, because a lot of people will watch this after I post it. They weren't able to be here live and will ask questions. So if I get any questions for you specifically, I'll send them along to you so you can reply.
Absolutely. Please do.
Yeah. And you can also go to Whiskey and Weird and find it on, you can stroll through and see if people in your spare time, because I know you're a busy man. But anyway, thank you so much, Jason, for being on with me tonight. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun. And I hope that sometime in the near future, we can just sit around a fire and sip whiskey and talk about whatever weird stuff we want.
That would be great. I know we're planning a trip back to the States, Pete, Olivia, and I. So that would be awesome. Or if you guys are up here, you're more than welcome. There's always space here.
Yeah, well, I'm going to have a handful of places for us to investigate when you guys come back down next year. So
perfect. No, that's going to be fantastic.
That'll be awesome. Well, thanks again. And you have an amazing night, lovely night, and good luck with all of your endeavors at this time.
Thanks so much, Lauren. Thanks so much for having me on. It was great.
All right. Take care, Jason.
You too.